This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Gainin Fast on Memphis podcast with Aaron Schreiber. Kind of grabs you by the boo-boo, don't it?
Welcome to the Gainin Fast on Memphis podcast with Aaron Schreiber, brought to you by Arlo Revolution. Each week, Aaron connects melodies and memories with fans and artists from all genres of life. When all else in life is gone, only music will be left to leave the legacy of life's adventures. Please welcome your host for the Gainin Fast on Memphis podcast, Aaron Schreiber.
All right, what's going on, everybody? We're going to go ahead and test the audio, make sure everything's up and running. Everything's sounding good. If you guys are in the chat, give us a thumbs up. Say hey. Let us know where you're from or watching tonight. Give me a good one tonight, guys. I know I say this every week, but God, researching for this week was probably one of the best. I've just having so much fun with it. But see, I'm getting the thumbs up. You good over there? No, you're excited for tonight too, aren't you? You're over here. What? You're quiet. Oh, you're muted. That's why you're always muted. I need that for real life.
Sorry about that.
So everything sounds good on your end?
Yep, we sound good.
All right. So I'm ready to do that. All right, guys. Welcome to season 4 of the Gaining Fast on Memphis podcast. Each week, we connect melodies and memories with fans, artists, and passionate, driven individuals in and around the music community. I'm your host, Aaron Schreiber. Tonight, we are presented by our good friends at Arlo Revolution, cinematic wedding films, music videos, and promos. Find them at arlorevolution.com. Then our on-screen sponsors, Art on a Higher Wire by Joel, original custom artwork inspired by your life moments, treasured photos, and memories. And our good buddy Corey Oliphant and the Original Church Choir. Each week, we're honored to have Corey and the OC as a sponsor. We thank all of our sponsors for continued support and growth of the show. If you're always looking for ways, we talk about it every week. The heart and soul of our show is our Patreon page. Tiers to start at $1. We do have a little discount over there. If you sign up for a full year, you get 2 months for free. So that's a really cool thing to check out too. And you get cool little perks. I know if you're on our Patreon, you got on the guest list for our 100th episode next month in Nashville, Tennessee. So cool things every now and then that happens with our Patreon page. So go ahead, check it out. If Patreon is something you can't do right now, the next best way to support the show is to like, share, review, and subscribe anywhere you can find it. Mainly the iPhone, if you're an iPhone user, the little iPod podcast app, whatever they call that app now these days. They're always changing stuff. But if you're listening to this on a streaming platform, remember, join us live every Tuesday night, soon to be Monday nights at 7 p.m. You can interact with our guests every week. If you have any questions, you can ask it in the chat. We can put it on the screen and get you involved with the show. So we do have our August freebies this month, remember? So if you are part of our Patreon, you're automatically entered. And I do have one here. I got a little early. So one of Chris Hadfield's books we have tonight, amazing photo book. You are here. I started digging into it. We'll talk about it tonight. That his CD. We got a Chief merch gift card, autographed Matt Kenyon CD. We'll be drawing in a couple weeks. So some really cool stuff coming your way, and we cannot wait for that. So yeah, but I'm going to tell you what I can't wait for is tonight's episode. So tonight we welcome in astronaut and commander of the International Space Station, Chris Hadfield. As a kid who wasn't told to reach for the stars, well, Chris did just that. He was inspired by the Apollo 11 moon landing and never looked back. Chris is one of the hardest working, motivated, and passionate people I've ever had the pleasure of researching for this show. And I can't wait to hear all about his journey from space to inspiration. We're going to go ahead and welcome Chris Hadfield on. Hey, bud. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the welcome. I've been looking forward to talking to you as well, to you both. Thanks very much.
It's so much fun to have you on tonight. Just because everything that I was researching, the path I was going down, because I'm a huge music guy. And then I discovered you and really with the whole music and David Bowie. And then I heard you earlier, you told my wife before we dig into it that you're touring with Bowie's band. I'm like, whoa, Spidey senses went up. So that is amazing work. But before we get into all that, welcome to the show. And I want to throw it back to kind of when you were a kid, man, before the moon landing and everything. I want to know what got you interested into space and into music, dude, because I know you're a very musical person. And I've noticed a lot of astronauts, a lot of talented people are musical as well. So I really want to know how you got into all that.
Well, let's see. I got into being an astronaut, I think, through like comic books first when I was really little. And then science fiction books, and then Star Trek on TV. I'm old enough just to have watched Star Trek as each show was being revealed every week. What Spock and Kirk and everybody Bones were up to this week, and then 2001: A Space Odyssey. All those fantastic and false things were happening, but at the same time, people were really flying in space, and that really amazed me. That something that seemed like just straight fiction and fantasy could actually be a real thing that I might get to do in my life. So that's what really got me pointed in the direction of maybe trying to turn myself into an astronaut. And then on the music side, two things, I think, Aaron. One is my mom's a really good musician. She's classically trained as a piano player, but she's also got a lot of talent and got one of those natural melody or harmony ears. And she's one of those people that you can say, hey, this song, it goes la, 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 and she'll play it with full chording, the whole thing on piano, even though she's never heard it before. And so I had the influence of my mom, who would always play music on the farm where I grew up. And then my dad, who has no musical talent at all, but who likes music. He was a big fan of the Kingston Trio. Nice. And he had an old Wollensack reel-to-reel tape player. And when I was a kid, every evening in the household, he would put on that Wollensack and it would build up static. You'd have to slap the side of the machine every so often to get the noise out of it. But I grew up listening to the beautiful 3-part harmonies of bands like the Kingston Trio and Peter, Paul, and Mary and such. And that really set a bit in my mind of just how beautiful music could be, but also how music was made, the way my mom was doing it. And so I think that's where my music interests really started.
So that's a phenomenal story. Just to hear all that, and how you got into it, because I love this, following this along, researching everything, little aspect of kind of how you got to a different point. So you're born in Canada and Sarnia, correct?
Yeah, I'm just down the river from Sarnia right now. It's about 5 miles that way.
That's awesome. I have family. Where are they? Windsor, outside Toronto. So my uncle was in Barrie for a while, and unfortunately he passed last year of COVID. They had a big outbreak at one of the nursing homes in Barrie, Ontario.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, he was happening in a lot of places. I'm sorry to hear that.
No, that's all right. I appreciate that, man. But yeah, he was in the nursing home that they had that happened, all that, and just a while to everything that happened, and the whole world's gone into craziness. But we're getting back. We're gonna get back. We're all gonna enjoy it. So I love that watching the moon landing got you interested in things, because as a kid, now how I mentioned, you see these things and you're like, man, it'd be really cool to be able to do this and see these things. And working so hard is what you did, and the different paths you went. You started off, so you got in the military young, or right out of high school? Did you get into the military, or how did that?
Well, a lot of countries have some sort of teenage opportunity. Like a lot of high schools have some sort of ROTC, or colleges have ROTC. And in Canada, we have a thing called Air Cadets. And yeah, nice pictures you're putting up. I love those.
Oh, it's like some fun pictures.
That is not astronaut training with Adam Savage. But and so when I was a teenager, I'd already decided I wanted to try and turn myself into an astronaut. But how do you do that, right? Especially, I'm from Canada, where we didn't have NASA or rockets or anything. But I thought the only thing that I can really control is myself and my own decision making. So I thought, if I'm going to fly in space, I should learn how to fly, because flying's a verb. And so I looked around, and I couldn't afford to go teach myself to fly or buy lessons. But there's this program like Civil Air Patrol in the States, but a little more paramilitary. Anyway, Air Cadets in Canada, they would teach you to fly. And so I joined Air Cadets when I was 13, and they taught me a lot more than how to just fly. They taught me leadership and self-discipline, but they did teach me to fly. And so even as a teenager, I had my pilot's license before I had my driver's license, just because I focused on it and I had the opportunity. And as a result, I've been a pilot my whole life. I was still, I still fly airplanes now.
Oh, that's amazing. And I love it, because you looked at it. All right, what do I have to do to get to being an astronaut? You just kind of took steps. Air Cadet, wasn't Jim Carrey in that, or part of that somehow?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, a lot of Canadians were. There's Army cadets and Sea cadets, but also Air cadets. Yeah, Jim Carrey lived in the Toronto area, and so I've heard he was as well. But yeah, it's a good program. But when I was 14 years old, the summer I was too young to go learn to fly airplanes. I went to junior leaders camp, and I learned about leadership. And who knew that 40 years later I'd be commanding the International Space Station and using the things I learned as a 14-year-old to actually help command, sort of like the world spaceship. So yeah, cadets was a really good program for me.
So you got out of the cadets, and after you went on that step, when did you finally get onto the path of, okay, now I'm getting prepped to go into space? Or when did you know, hey, I'm not familiar with Canada. We have NASA here. So do you guys have a space program, or did you work with NASA?
Yeah, so NASA is the United States Space Agency, and there's one in Europe, and there's one in Japan, and there's one in the United Arab Emirates, and Canada has the Canadian Space Agency. And so it's the same sort of thing. And they occasionally recruit astronauts. And the first astronauts in Canada were hired in 83, 84. And then they decided in 1992 to hire another class of astronauts. NASA hires astronauts every 2 or 3 years, but in Canada it's about every 8 or 10 years. And so they stuck an ad in the newspapers that said, there was before the internet, 1991, 92. So all the newspapers across Canada, if you went to the want ads, there was a thing that said wanted astronauts. And I'd been looking for that ad my whole life,
right?
And so and then, they just said 3 things. They said you had to be healthy enough, right? And you had to have a bachelor's degree, and you had to be a Canadian citizen. And I was all 3 of those things. And so I applied with 5,329 other people. And I took it, like a lot of other things in my life. I looked at it and I said, okay, how do you do well at this thing? What do I need to change about myself? How can I put my best foot forward? And so I sent in the best resume I could possibly muster. And I even bought expensive paper to print it on. And then I didn't want to just use the U.S. I was a test pilot with the Navy down in Maryland at the time. And I didn't just want to use the U.S. mail to send it. So I hired whatever one of the delivery services was, so that I would get there for sure. And it took almost half a year to go through all the levels of the astronaut selection, the interviews and the whittling down from 5,000 to 500 to 200 to 100 to 50. And then the final 20 of us for a week in the nation's capital doing every test they could think of. And out of that, they chose 4. And then, and they, I was sitting in my living room one day and waiting to find out if I was going to be one of the final 4.
It's like the draft, like the NFL draft. Yeah. Waiting for that phone call.
I was just waiting for a phone call.
Yeah.
And, it was a pretty watershed phone call to get, to have the president of the space agency call up and say, hey, do you still want to be an astronaut? And I've always wanted to be an astronaut.
I saw that drive, yeah.
So that was kind of both the end of the preparation selection phase, and now the very start of the actual astronaut training phase.
So that during that you did say something, and that's when I was researching, I said you were in the U.S. military. First off, thank you for your service for that. Amazing. But being a Canadian resident, why were you in the U.S.? Why did you come to the U.S. military and fly planes here? I was just curious about that. I
served it. So in Canada, we have a Army, Navy, Air Force. Ours is the Royal Canadian Air Force, and I was an officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force for 25 years, and I eventually reached the rank of colonel, or 06 or whatever.
Wow.
But obviously, the militaries they work together. If you're like part of NATO or part of NORAD or something, And I was a Cold War combat pilot. I used to go intercept Soviet bombers off the coast of North America, and we would go intercept a Soviet bomber, and then we'd escort it as far as the border, and then the F-15s or the F-16s would scramble out of Maine, and they'd come up and they'd escort just to make sure that the bombers weren't doing anything hostile. So we cooperate all the time. And so we have exchange programs. And so there's always Americans flying and working with the military in Canada. And, it just builds up mutual understanding and respect.
And that's the thing that we like regular civilians
and everybody. But in my case, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Yeah.
And so I needed to go to test pilot school. And to be a test pilot, there's only like 4 big test pilot schools in the world. And one of them is with the U.S. Air Force and one was with the U.S. Navy. And Canada doesn't have one, at least not a government one. So the Canada sends one person a year to test pilot school. So I had to work hard to get selected to that. And I got selected to go down to the one at Edwards Air Force Base where Chuck Yeager broke the speed of sound. And so I spent a year as a test pilot with the U.S. Air Force. But then I did an exchange tour with the U.S. Navy at Pax River. So I was a test pilot for the U.S. Navy, working off of aircraft carriers and testing all sorts of things to do with F-18s for 3 or 4 years in Maryland. And I was there when Canada recruited astronauts. And I got chosen to go start working with the Canadian Space Agency, who then, sent me down to work with NASA.
So the first time you walk into NASA and you know that your end goal, and one of your goals is to get on the space station or get out of orbit, pretty much get up into space. What are the stepping stones? What you got there? I know you guys go through a very extensive training. How long is it? Like, how long did you actually have to wait from the time that you first walked into the door to the time that you actually got into space?
It's sort of the opposite of waiting, Aaron. You are racing to try and learn enough things and get competent enough so that when the day comes that you're going to fly, you're ready. Yeah. It's not like you wait and then they go, okay, get in, and then you go somewhere or something. The Space Shuttle was a crazy, dangerous, and complicated machine. I mean, we only flew it 135 times and we killed 2 complete crews. It was a hard machine to fly. And it took a huge amount of human interaction. We've come a long way since then. But so I spent a lot of time. And then on my 3rd space flight, I was the pilot of a Russian spaceship. So first I had to learn to speak Russian. And then I had to learn control theory and orbital mechanics and everything in Russian. And then I had to fly that machine in Russian, and through all the training so that I could fly it solo if I needed to be. So the training goes on forever. I basically trained every day for 21 years.
What was harder to train for as an astronaut? For astronaut?
What's that? Sorry?
What's harder to train for? Being in the military, like boot camp during military, or being an astronaut?
Well, being an astronaut, it's the hardest part is the mental task. I mean, physically, obviously, you got to be in shape, but anybody can, pretty quickly get themselves to do the physical things an astronaut does. The hard part is the incredibly complicated and multi-decade long memory task. Imagine if 6 years ago, someone had taken you aside, Aaron, and said, okay, you've got to remember these 6 things because at some point they'll be the difference between life or death. And that happened to you every day for the last 6 years. And now today is the day that you have to remember that thing that guy told you 6 years ago. I mean, how do you get it into your head, and how do you put it somewhere in your head where you're going to be able to access it on the day that you need it? And it's part of the reason I went to universities was, it's not really what I learned in the university, but I learned how to learn, in a university. You learn how to collate stuff and how to figure out how to store it so that you can actually get the information when you need it. And so the biggest, way far away, the hardest part of being a professional astronaut is the memory task. And that's what we work at all the time.
Oh, I did. And we'll get to it, but I know you had a couple of situations where I'm sure you had to use a couple of those 6 things as well when you're up there.
There's just a million things. Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw my mom was watching, and it kind of popped in my head when I saw this. What did you have to tell your parents? And what did your parents say to you, or how did you get them to, okay, you're going to go to space. We'll be okay with it? Because any mom, I mean, how you said the 2 crews that you guys lost and everything else, it was not, the odds were never in astronauts' favors at all. How did you get that? How did you get your parents' approval? Really?
Well, everything worth doing in life has risk.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yes.
And sometimes we just don't think about it that way, but think about how you learn to ride a bike. or anything else. Learn to ride a horse, a motorcycle, get married, go get a tooth pulled, whatever. Everything worth doing in life has some level of risk. And you need to decide, number one, is this a risk worth taking or not? Mm-hmm. And so when I was a kid, I convinced myself that there's some risks I would never take. I just don't think they're worth taking. But exploring the rest of the universe, and that's worth me taking a risk for. Yeah. So I convinced myself first. And then I grew up on a farm with 2 brothers and 2 sisters. So it's not like my parents were super interested in every single thing I was doing. They had 5 kids and they're running a farm, and my dad's a pilot as well. So they were busy people. And so they're like, the kids are relatively clean and they're well enough fed and they're doing their chores and good, So when I started saying I want to be an astronaut, they're like, well, yeah, sure, that's fine, but clear the table and do what you're supposed to be doing today. But my dad and my mom they're smart people. I'm lucky enough they're both still alive in their mid 80s. Dad's still flying airplanes at 87. Wow. But they really honored competence, like knowledge. And a lot of people say it's good to be curious, but anybody can be curious. The really hard part is actually finding out the answer and making the answer part of who you are. Any 2-year-old kid can say, why? But learning the answer and then internalizing the answer enough that you can build on it, that's what my folks really valued. And so they instilled that in me. And then when I said I want to be an astronaut, they're like, well, odds are 0 because Canada doesn't have astronauts. Yeah. But who knows? The United States didn't have astronauts until 1961. So things changed. Later, on the moon. And what they were most interested in was I setting myself on a path that would have a bunch of good options and going to military academy, the military college in Canada, and getting university degrees and becoming a pilot. And, they're like, all those things are going to lead probably to a successful life. And who knows, maybe even fly in space. They never thought I would. But the timing worked out. And your parents, they wanted you to dream. They were like, well, obviously there are risks, but if you get good at stuff, then that's one of the biggest things you can do to control risk, And there's a lot of incompetent drivers die in car crashes in the U.S. every day. So try not to be an incompetent driver. Do everything you can to be a good driver so that you don't end up being that statistic. And so since my dad was a pilot, my mom was always like, well, that's my first flight suit right there. That picture you just put up. My mom was like, hey, they love what they're doing and they get good at what they're doing. And there's risk involved, but denying somebody their dreams, that has a risk also. That has consequences also. So my parents were okay with it. And then when I got selected as an astronaut, of course, they were insufferably proud. And that's a nice thing to be able to make your parents proud.
Oh, for always, dude. I just saw the other night that there was a picture in the big leagues. First debut game, his dad was in the crowd. And they had a picture of his dad bawling, throws a no-hitter, a perfect game, his very first game. And you just feel that as a dad. I got 2 young kids. You just feel that, and you just know that feeling of proud. So yeah, I'm sure the minute you got selected, they're probably just as happy as you, if not happier for you. So
I agree with you. And I'm really, my wife and I have 3 kids, and they make me proud all the time. And it's a wonderful feeling, to try and reflect it back to them, when they're doing good.
Oh, I love that, man, too. So it's a good thing being a dad. Yeah, I love that. I love that feeling. So, all right. So you were the 4th Canadian in space, but the first to do a spacewalk, correct?
Yep. Yeah, it's on the $5 bill in Canada. Yeah.
Oh, real? Man, I'm learning. Is that, what do they call those? Loonies and toonies?
Well, those are the coins, but okay. The $5 bill, it's blue. And it's got a picture on the back. And I unveiled that bill in space, as Canada's first spacewalker. So there have been a few other Canadians since me that have walked in space. Yeah. But my mom is convinced that one on the $5 bill, that's me. So
that's for sure you. Yeah. And you spent, I saw a couple things, 166 days or 144 days, the longest?
My third, 166 total, I think. I didn't count them, but someone else has counted. So just a little under a half a year in space. That's about 2,600 times around the world.
Oh my God, man. And just the things you've seen. This picture, I have to go sideways. This picture here, I just put up, it was a picture that someone photoshopped a bag of weed over over Easter eggs. And I remember someone, I work for a dispensary. Someone showed me this. I'm like, oh, that's Photoshop. There was never any weed in space because y'all cannot be at all disoriented in any bit because there's way too much risk.
If we pick up the phone and dial 911, we answer the phone. We're the only people there. And at any given moment, I mean, if you sit quiet on the space station, you can hear little meteorites ricocheting off the thin metal hull of the ship. And you know for sure, eventually, one of those little meteorites is going to be big enough to punch a hole. You just hope it isn't today. So you have to be able to respond to things going wrong all the time. And so obviously you can't be impaired or, you're not up there for yourself. No. You're not up there for a joyride. It's not a vacation. So, it'd be like, should there be weed in when your brain surgeon is working on you, or in the cockpit of a complicated
those tourists that are going to a couple of years.
There's a time and a place for inebriation and intoxication, but flying a spaceship isn't it.
So you're out here doing a spacewalk. You're fixing the International Space Station. You might have took an edible, and now all of a sudden you got water in your eyes, and what are you going to do? I mean, you have to think about that. So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, one of the biggest things that if you look up Chris Hadfield and read, definitely go and watch his TED Talk. I don't want to talk too much about it because he could do way much better on that TED Talk than I. But while he was in space and doing a spacewalk once, he had it was water and soap from your anti-fog, right? Correct, on your mask?
Well, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I knew that something had gotten in my eye, and then it had spread to my other eye, and it made both my eyes blind while I was outside there's a picture of it there on Time magazine. Man, you have terrific research. That's impressive. But while I was outside during my first spacewalk, in fact, while that picture was being taken, both my eyes were blind. And that's a good time to be paying attention and not just start to be thinking about, what you're going to do when stuff goes wrong.
Now, in this moment, are you tethered at all? Or are you just holding on with that one hand?
You're always tethered when you do a spacewalk because you can miss your grip. And it's it's like a little clothesline on a very gentle spring reel. And they roll out, depending on their length, they're different lengths, maybe 50 feet. So you could, if you missed your grip, you could float off. If you look close in this picture, you can see I've also got my feet clicked into a foot restraint. So it frees up both my hands to work. But no, you're always tethered during a spacewalk because if you float away, then you're in trouble.
You don't have like a jetpack; you just fly back.
They're gonna name a school after you, and but that unfortunately, so it's one of the things you got to be very careful of. You got to be super disciplined when you're outside on a spacewalk. Although I am wearing a jetpack, so that if my tether broke, I could actually manually activate that jetpack, and it just uses compressed nitrogen, and I could fly a little joystick, and it's got a real limited amount. But if as the ultimate sort of backup plan, we do wear this jet-powered, jetpack that could bring us back. But we've only tested it. We've never had to use it, fortunately, in reality.
Laura Hush says you're going to need the weed if you float off. I mean, you're going to need a lot more than weed if you float off.
Yeah, if that's all you're counting on. Yeah, it'd be nice to use your jetpack to get yourself back, especially if you're on the dark side of the world. I mean, how do you even know where the space station? It's kind of where the stars aren't. It's kind of hard to see in the darkness. So it's it's one of the things we train for.
Man, it's just amazing to hear about all this. This guy, I never thought I'd ever get the chance to spend time with an astronaut. So it's really cool to be able to ask you these different things and I don't know, spend this time with you. So I'm enjoying this interview. With all of this, and with that said, I know you always dreamed of being on the moon. You just did the 3 space things. If you ever got a chance to go where you are now, I know you're retired, would you go back to space? If they said, we're going to put you on the moon, if you go back, would you do it? Would you go for a 4th time?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. And I sure. But you got to remember, I was an astronaut for 21 years.
Yeah.
Just so that I could be competent enough to be part of a crew to go do the 3 space flights that I did. Yeah. It wasn't like I was doing something else for those 21 years. And you're supporting other people's space flights. Yeah. I worked in mission control. I was NASA's chief Capcom for 25 shuttle missions and helping other people. And I was NASA's director in Russia for a couple of years. And I was chief of robotics and chief of space station operations. All of those things are necessary to be able to send some people to the moon. And so someone has to do all that work, and it's the really interesting part. It's not just standing on top of Mount Everest, but it's the climbing of Mount Everest that really makes the whole thing worthwhile. So, but if you said to me, Aaron, hey, in 8 years, we want you to walk on the moon, but you're going to have to now invent that flight and develop it and create it and perfect it and then practice it for the next 8 years so that you have a chance of succeeding. Oh yeah, that would be the coolest. What else are you going to do for the next 8 years? Why not do that? That'd be a great thing. So yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I hope you're offering for real because I'd love to.
that'd be cool if you ever got that chance to do that. I know a lot of the researching, I saw that. That was one question that popped in my mind about that. But with that said too, spending a lot of time in space, and I know doing the research, I learned that a lot of things happen to your body while you're in space and for when you get back. Do you think astronauts have like maybe a limit of days or trips that they could actually go to space? You spent 166 days there. If you would have spent 300 days there and came back, I know a lot with your bone structure, your muscles, a lot of that alters while you're up there.
Well, the most experienced astronaut in American history, and someone who's also commanded the space station twice and done 10 spacewalks, and is training for another spaceflight right now. It's a lady named Peggy Whitson, and she's been in space for 665 days. And then there's a Russian who's been in space for like 850 days. So that's the all-time record. What limits you, Aaron, and we didn't know the answer to your question 10 years ago, because who would you ask? You just got to go try it out. What we found is the limiting factor probably is just the radiation. Because on Earth here, whether you're in Memphis or in Sarnia, there's an awful lot of air and water vapor between you and the sun. But when you get up above the atmosphere, there's nothing between you and the sun. So all of that radiation is pouring at you. Now the Earth's got a magnetic field, so it's invisible, but it deflects a lot of that energy away. But a lot of it still hits you. You would not believe when you're by the window on the spaceship just how intense the heat of the sun is. And if you could put your skin directly there, it would burn in seconds. So the radiation becomes the real limiter. And if you close your eyes on the spaceship and wait a little while, you can actually see flashes of light as high energy particles are going through your optic nerve. You can actually see the radiation going through your body when you're up on a spaceship because our shielding isn't very good. Now, if we build great shielding around our ship, surrounded it in water or whatever, then we could stay up indefinitely. But that stuff's heavy and we haven't made the trade-off yet. But right now, the limit is how much. It's sort of like being a nuclear worker or something. What are the OSHA limits? And I think you're not allowed to have more than in your entire life, more than a 3% increase in the chance of getting cancer as a result of your work. And astronauts are just government employees. They live by the same OSHA rules. So that ends up limiting. And something most people won't know, there are parts of your body that are more susceptible to ionizing radiation than others. And actually our premenopausal women's reproductive systems are about as sensitive a part of the human body as there is for that type of cancers to develop. So those are the people that we have to be the most careful of to make sure that we're not giving people cancer, just by trying to do space exploration.
No, you still want to do it safely, and you want to do the research and the science safely. So
right, but we're learning as we go, but we know for sure that you could stay up there for years. I mean, Scott Kelly stayed up a year. There have been lots of Russians stay up for a year at a time. The longest in one stint is a guy named Valery Polyakov, who stayed up for 14 and a half months. So yeah, we could stay up a long time, but we can't stay up indefinitely unless we shield the ship better.
Yeah, definitely. And then coming back, I know it's probably a lot of work to kind of get being up there that long would be to get your body back to where, because you're not using different muscles. I was fascinated by the way you said, I saw an interview with you talking about how you sleep. And I never would have thought about like sleeping in space, how difficult it would be. But it was very interesting how you're talking about how you actually got to get comfortable to sleep and how you got to get used to that.
Well, you know how, tonight you're probably going to sit in an easy chair and maybe, I don't know if you have a beer or whiskey or something and relax and sit back. And I don't know maybe have a book or watching something on TV and you're probably going to doze off.
Yeah.
Well, when that happens on a spaceship, you float away because, there's nothing to hold you where you are. And so there'll be people in the evening who are typing away on a computer or doing something and they'll just doze off. And then they come floating through the spaceship and you're all kind of quiet, and you try and keep them from getting sucked into one of the air filter intakes. So it's beautiful sleeping on a spaceship because every muscle in your body is relaxed, every one. And you don't have to roll over, and your shoulder doesn't get sore. And so you just need really just a sleeping bag and just tie one string of your sleeping bag so you don't float around. And it's the best sleep you could ever imagine.
I was hearing you talk about that. I was like, dude, I could see that just weightless sleep. I was like, this, I love that.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun.
I've been showing some pictures of different books you've written. I do have one in front of me that You Are Here, the Around the World in 92 Minutes. I've been looking at this and reading a lot about it. Phenomenal. We're giving one away this month. If you guys are a part of our Patreon too, you have a new one coming out, The Apollo Murders, coming out in October. Tell us.
Yeah, I got one over my shoulder here. This one, it's not out yet, but this is one of the pre-publication copies. And Ryan Reynolds has a copy of it, and James Cameron, I sent him a copy, and he loved this book. And I mean, he ended up saying, "Hey, can I write something? Cover for everybody else?" So it's a thriller mystery, alternative fiction, and alternative history fiction, and everybody's just loving this book. Publishers Weekly is giving it their highest rating, and so I'm really happy. I think people are going to like this book. And it's already sold thousands and thousands of copies, and it doesn't even come out till October 12th. So I'm pretty proud. It was my first. It's the fourth book I've written, and that one you got up there, Astronaut's Guide. It was a New York Times bestseller, but this one's doing really great, and I think people are going to like The Apollo Murders.
The You Are Here was a bestseller too, correct?
It was a New York Times bestseller also. Yes, and this Apollo Murders, it's already in 10 languages, and it doesn't even come out for 2 months, so it's really getting latched onto well. So it's a lot of fun, now that I've done some interesting things in life, to be able to try and describe them to people, whether it's just like a guidebook, like The Astronaut's Guide of How to Lead a Better Life, or whether it's, fiction about spaceflight, so people can get a real visceral sense of what spaceflight is actually like,
What was, when you're taking these photos, what was the best place to photograph? I mean, every time you kind of went around there in orbit, you're like, I got to get a picture of that place because it's always just standing.
It's sort of like if someone handed you a camera and then plunked you right into, I don't know, the 23rd row back of the Grand Ole Opry, and said, "Quick, take good pictures." You'd take some pictures, but if they said, "Okay, we're going to let you go to the Grand Ole Opry every night for the next 50 nights, and we're going to give you a really good camera, and on the 49th and the 50th night, we want you to take good pictures," you'd be a lot better at seeing what you're taking a picture of. And that's what it's like on a spaceship. You get good at looking at the world. You know where to look back to, and where the world's going to show you something beautiful. And the noctilucent clouds they're like a ghost surf above our atmosphere. But to me, I think the most photogenic place on Earth is where there's the deep of the ocean, where it's incredibly dark blue, but right next to the shallow of the ocean, where it's light blue. And the Bahamas are great for that because there's sort of a cleft in the continental shelf. And so the tongue of the ocean comes in. So there's this dark blue tongue that comes up against the shallow reefs. And the Bahamas, they look like this big iridescent butterfly. So yeah, I think maybe the prettiest place on Earth from space is the Bahamas.
Oh, I love that. I love in the book too. A couple of places in the book you actually have it compared to like animals, like different little places and everything. I'm like, that's pretty neat. I'm showing we're located right outside Chicago, so I'm showing a picture of Chicago right now. Yeah, it's really cool to see the different things and the lights and what you could see from that far away. So yeah, it's phenomenal. If you guys not have this book, I guess I am giving one away. Check this one out, but definitely. If they're going to look for Apollo Murders, where are they going to look for it? Amazon best place, or where?
It's everywhere. If you just Google the Apollo Murders, or if you go to my website, which is chrishadfield.ca or .com, but that'll get you there, and it'll have all my books. And no matter where you are in the world, if you just go to chrishadfield.ca/books, then it'll tell you all that you can get it. We just finished the audiobook, and I haven't told anybody yet. But so I'm going to announce to you who is the audio reader, and it's one of the best in the business, a guy named Ray Porter. He's done over 400 books, so many mystery books and thriller books, and he's just got the perfect voice for the Apollo murders. So I was working with Ray this week as we just did the final take of the Apollo murders, and so there's the audiobook and the ebook, but yeah, you can get it anywhere books are sold, including in 10 languages besides English.
That is phenomenal. And you've done voiceover stuff yourself too for a couple of TV or movies and stuff. I had a friend of mine text me the other day, and she's like, "Oh, hey, we put on I forgot what show it was. Or like in the astronaut you interviewed, his name was on there." I'm like, "Really?"
I did a television series that I helped create and host with Will Smith for National Geographic called One Strange Rock, and then I did one for the BBC over in England. I helped create and hosted that show. And then I did one in Dubai as well for the United Arab Emirates. And then for my first book, I did the audio version of the book as well, since it was, my ideas and my story. But this one, the Apollo murders, this is like a movie script. And so, and there's a bunch of movie people asking us about it. So I'm not an actor. I couldn't do it justice. I needed someone who could, get all the voices right and the accents and the tension. And Ray Porter just did a great job of it.
That is awesome. I love that, man. We could have 4 episodes to talk about all the things you've accomplished, man. I love all this. I do want to bring up, you're currently an advisor for SpaceX and Virgin Galactic. I want to know, with everything going on, and we talked about all the work you put into yourself and getting to space, how do you feel about them taking tours to space that someone could just spend money and go up tomorrow or whatever? How do you feel about that now and how things are changing? Do you feel that this is what you've worked towards, maybe for us to maybe have this luxury down the road, or how do you?
Sure. I think if you asked the early airplane, pilots, if you asked Orville and Wilbur Wright or all those early people that developed flight and took all the risks, they weren't doing it so it would stay that way forever. Yeah. They did it to try and figure out how to make this safer and simpler and make it part of, the whole world economy. How can we make this a whole new way to travel around the world? And so spaceflight's exactly the same. There's still the whole rest of the universe for professional astronauts to go take risks and explore. How are we going to get people back to the surface of the moon and then start settling the moon and, building infrastructure there, and then, all the way and trying to do that in Mars. We've got a huge, unlimited amount of really complicated, dangerous work for professional astronauts like myself. But just launching to low Earth orbit or just above the atmosphere, that our machines are good enough now that it's still crazy expensive, because it's like, trying to buy an airline ticket in 1919, it was still only for the very wealthy, but you got to start somewhere. And so I think it's good. And I don't think that either Blue Origin, which has been around for 21 years, or Virgin Galactic, which has been around for 17 years, those two space companies, I'm not sure that either of them have the right model yet. Most of the early airlines all went broke. They didn't guess right, but they're trying. And, Elon Musk, there are 4 non-astronauts flying, not just above the atmosphere, but actually going to launch on September 15th and go around the world for 3 days. They're going to fly in space, around the world 50 times. And none of them are professional astronauts. That's how good our spaceships are now. So I think that's great. I think the more people that can actually see the world for what it truly is, it's if you spend your whole life there, right, in your little square block of Chicago, you're going to have a pretty distorted view of the world. And most of your decisions are not going to be very good for the rest of the world, but it's a lot healthier for 8 billion people if we're a little more globally aware. And so it's not the only thing we're doing, but I really think that that the work that is being done for commercial spaceflight is a really good and positive and important step. And everybody's kind of focused on the fact that, the people that started the company are wealthy. Well, of course they are. They started big, complicated companies, and they've been paying for it out of their own pocket for years. Someone's got to do that. But what I'm really excited about is There was a young lady on that Virgin Galactic flight. She was born in India, completely self-made woman, came to the United States, got a couple university degrees. She's now working as a business person in Washington, working as a senior person for Virgin Galactic, and she got to fly in space. And that's a really cool precedent setting thing. To me, that's the part to look at and get excited about. Don't just get excited by the shiny object of a wealthy person, but notice the capability that we're developing.
And that's why I worded that like that, because like, did you see it as like kind of like evolving into more travel, and that's what you worked hard for your whole life, is to get to that point. We did have a good question in the chat about living on the moon or Mars. Do you think that'll ever happen? Like when the first person will actually go up there and live for a little bit, or do you think we'll see that like in the next 50 years?
Oh, sure. Have you seen the spaceship that Elon's just about to launch around the world down in Boca Chica down in Texas, right on the Mexican border? I mean, he is stacking the rocket, in the next few weeks to do the very first full up test of the vehicle that NASA has already chosen to be the vehicle that's taken people to start settling, bringing heavy lift to the moon. I mean, that's going on right now. And Elon said this last week that he expects to be landing that thing on the moon before 2024. I think he's over optimistic, but it takes that type of person. But I don't think 2026 is out of the question. And that's think of 5 years ago, that was only 2016. That wasn't very long ago, So we're right on the cusp of that. And what's always stopped us is our rockets weren't good enough. It was just too dangerous and therefore too expensive. But if you can make a big, safe rocket, and he's already, he's already 10 times cheaper than the Space Shuttle ever was. He's about to be 100 times cheaper than the Space Shuttle ever was, and maybe be able to get down to 1,000 times cheaper, where what used to be $25,000 would now be, $25. And you can change the cost of transportation like that. And obviously, there's a lot of bridges to cross between here and there, but we're getting there. Then it opens up heavy lift. And if you've got heavy lift, then the moon is a lot closer. It's only 3 days away. And so we're getting way closer to it than a lot of people think. And yeah, we got serious problems to solve on Earth, just like we always have had. But that doesn't mean we stop exploring and stop pushing new frontiers. And it's always a balance. And so to me, it's really important to do both as hard and fast and well as you possibly can. And all those technologies that we're really pushing for aerodynamics and everything, they naturally they spin off, and communications and navigation, and think about GPS and how we talk to each other and how we forecast weather, and all the virtual presence we've had. That all comes because of space technology relaying and developing and inventing. So to me, you can't have one without the other. And so I'm pretty excited where we are in history.
I love that. I love that. I'm hoping to be able to see more in my time. I know my parents got married in '69, so it's like it was really cool, like having my dad show me like when I was younger, like the moonwalk and all this other stuff. It was cool seeing that then. So I really can't wait to be able to show my kids the same thing. And this is where we're getting with evolution, or just where we're getting to in life with everything. Before we wrap everything up and we move over to our sponsor section, I really want to talk a little bit about music with you, because you got to do some really cool stuff.
Sure.
Your son pushed you to do. Oh, look at this guy. Your son.
I've had this guitar since I was a young teen. This is a Yamaha FG 180, and I keep it here in my office. So if we're going to talk about music, I'll keep it in my lap.
There you go. Your son's the one who pushed you to do the video. He was really wanted you to kind of do something while you're in space, and he ended up rewriting Space Oddity for you to do in space. Did you say it had 7 million views in like 24 hours at one point?
Yeah. Well, when I recorded an audio track just using GarageBand, and then I did the guitar track underneath with a click track on GarageBand. But I was just listening to David Bowie's audio, and so I worked on the audio track for a while, and then I had a friend on Earth who put all that beautiful piano intro. She's terrific. She used to sing in Bowie's band, and then another guy named Joe Corcoran, a Canadian down in LA, he put the rest of the instrumentals under. So it was my voice and my guitar from orbit with these added in instrumentals. But it took time, and I could only do it when I was supposed to be asleep because we're busy on Spaceship.
Yeah.
And then my son said, "Dad, you got to make a video." So it's like, geez, I'm busy, but okay. I floated around one Saturday for an hour and filmed myself. And then my son edited that video together, and we didn't get it released until the night before my third space flight was over. But as you say, when I came back down through the atmosphere, I was the pilot of a little Russian capsule, and we thudded back into Earth and rolled to a stop. And the Russian rescue team opened up the hatch. And the guy who opened up the hatch, Sergey, I think, he said, "Chris, привет, я видел твой клип, мальчик, был очень прекрасно." And he was like saying, "Hey, I've seen your video." And 7 million people have seen it already. And it hadn't even been out 24 hours yet. So that's when I realized, holy crap, a lot of people are going to see this video. And I'm glad people like it, because now it's been seen hundreds and hundreds. Just where my son posted it, it's got like 50 million views or something. So with all the rebroadcast, it's great. I'm glad people got to see that video, and Mr. Bowie liked it as well, which is really nice.
You got good reviews from him. He enjoyed it. Now, we talked about at the beginning of the show, you briefly mentioned you're touring with his band, dude. Just tell me what all that means to you now. How kind of becoming an astronaut, you've got to do other things that you get to be a kid at doing, almost like your love for music gets to come back, and everything else you get to do this stuff. So this touring,
you get to do some amazing stuff, like the Queen and Prince Philip. They sent us a note, and we got to go have a sleepover at Windsor Castle, if you can believe it. And that sounds like fairy tale, but that actually happened. My wife and I, and the guys from Bowie's band, the guy Earl Slick and Mike Garson and company, that they were like Bowie's family. They'd been with him for 30 or 40 years. Yeah. They asked me to come and tour with them, and I got to play several cities. And it was like being with his loved ones, with his family, and no one wanted Bowie to be gone. He died way too young, and everybody loves that music. So I've been incredibly lucky, to be able to play way above. I'm just a standard hack guitar player and standard sort of, hack singer, but to be able to play with some of the really good musicians and play with symphonies, the music that I've written. I've always been a musician, just like my mom, but and we're all musicians. And you're probably not the worst musician in the world. That's just one person. And you're probably not the best musician in the world. That's just one person. The rest of us are just somewhere in the middle. And you need to get over that part and just stop trying to compete and just play music and love playing it, and do it as well as you can, and make music with other people and look around inside the music. To me, that's the real beauty of whether you're on a spaceship or on the Earth. That's the real beauty of connecting through music.
And I interview a lot of songwriters. So every Tuesday night, we normally have a lot of songwriters that come in on the show. And I've always talked to them. Some of the best people I love aren't even the best singers or the best guitar players. It's just the way they portray the music, the way the lyrics come off, or the way they could deliver it. And I felt that with your performance of Space Oddity. It's the hearing that and everything. And it's just like, all right, you made it your own. And that's why I loved about him. Why David Bowie and all of them loved the way you were portraying this song, is because you made it into your own.
Yeah, and I'm really pleased with how it came out, and as you say, my son Evan, he modified the words so that it brought it up to date. That song was written in '69, so, and I've got to know John Prine before he passed away a little bit, and I spent a while talking to Neil Young once, and those two guys, they're not the greatest singers in the world.
No,
holy cow, can those guys write music, man, and can they perform? And so I learned a lot just talking to people like that. And a lot of it's just have the confidence in your own art and don't criticize it until you're finished creating it. And allow don't just write a song, but just that's what Neil Young said to me. See, don't write a song, just write a song down. Let it happen and write that song, and don't judge it till it's done, and let the art sort of create itself through you. And I think everyone could take a little lesson from that in how they create things in the world.
I love that, man. I just love that. If you guys want to dig more in, he has a song. It's somebody singing ISS with Ed Robertson of Bare Naked Ladies. You did stuff with him. Music Mondays you used to do on your social media. He recorded an album in space, Songs from a Tin Can, which if you are part of our Patreon, we're giving away. Dude, what haven't you done? I love all this stuff, man. A couple questions a thing we do every week is our Powered by Pod Deck section of the night. And a couple cards I pulled earlier that I wanted to ask you and get just kind of, I don't know, get your opinion on these. But where did you watch your most memorable sunset? So I read somewhere that about every 45 minutes you saw a sunrise and a sunset. Do you remember where you were, what part of the world maybe you were watching where you're just like kind of breathtaking, like, all right, this was like the coolest sunset, or maybe you were on Earth with your wife or something. Where was your most memorable sunset you've ever seen?
The ones on the space station are beautiful, and they're fast, Aaron, because you're making them happen because you're going around the world at 5 miles a second. So it goes from the brilliance of the sun, and then the whole horizon goes into this darkening rainbow where it's like it's on fire, and then bam, it's gone. But I think my most memorable sunset, I took my kids to the Grand Canyon when they were about 8, 9, and 11, or maybe around that age. And I took them right up to the rim of the canyon for a sunset, and to see that raw geology and all of that, natural and human history, and to be in that spot and feel the echo and the wind and to watch the sunset there. It made both the Grand Canyon and it made the sunset better. So that was a beautiful moment to watch the sunset on that day.
And I love that answer, mainly because you have probably seen the best sunsets that anybody in this world will ever see, but yet you still pick a sunset with your family. So always remember that, y'all. Family always has to come first. I mean, you'll never have many moments with them, so take that much chances when you get them. The second one I had, and we talked shortly about when you were blinded in space, but have you ever had a false alarm moment, and what was it about? So other than that moment, has there ever been a time maybe when you're flying in the space shuttle or anything else where you might have thought, okay, this might be it, like maybe something was going wrong that you had to correct right away or something like that?
There are 3 big life-threatening things that could happen on a spaceship. 1 is a hole so that the air is rushing out. 2 is smoke or fire in the ship. And the 3rd is a contaminated atmosphere so you can't breathe. And each of them has a different sound alarm. And one night at 2 o'clock in the morning, one of those alarms went off when I was the commander of the spaceship. And so, I mean, you got to react just as if it's real, right? And your heart just, races, and you're running through it, and you're hoping that it's just a false alarm, because obviously it's just a smoke detector, but still. And fortunately, it was just a false alarm. But that was probably one of the worst moments of my life, because if you truly have a fire on a spaceship, you can fight it for a little while, but you're going to have to abandon ship if you can't get it out. And then basically you're abandoning the world's spaceship. So it's a pretty desperate situation. So I'm glad it was just a false alarm.
Because if you're far out, it might take a little bit for someone to get to you. You said you're your own 911. So
we're our own firemen up there.
And this is a personal question to wrap it up before we do our hot seat and call it a night. But growing up my whole life, I've always had anxiety and fear of flying. You have flown in spaceships, planes, everything amongst everything in the world. What would you tell somebody, maybe at a young age, that might have that fear of flying or that anxiety? How would you help them get over that?
Well, fear is good. Fear protects you when you don't know what you're doing, right? Little babies have fear of things, and otherwise you would constantly get into situations that would damage you or kill you. So there's nothing wrong with fear, but the greatest antidote for fear is competence. Think about how you learn to ride a bike, or when you learn to walk, or all the things that you've done in your life. Once you've decided, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and then you'll try and practice under a safe set of circumstances so that what used to be unknown and scary now becomes familiar. Then suddenly you don't have to be afraid anymore. You got more going on in yourself than fear. And so it's the same thing. If you're nervous about flying, well, how much do you want to fly? Is it really important to you or not? And if you got to fly, then if you got the time, simulate it a little bit, do the research, but then, what part of it? Go to the airport and practice 20 times or 30 times, or go to a little airport and spend a day learning how airplanes work, or just get in and out of the airplane 300 times, or go through a really accurate simulator 1,000 times, or whatever you have time for. And I, in my TED talk that you mentioned, I use spider webs because people are, naturally afraid of spiders. But if you can simulate it realistically enough, and if you can understand it well enough that you become sort of educated and competent at it, then it's just like learning to ride a bike. What used to make you scared, now it's just one of those things that you know how to do, and you don't need to just be afraid anymore. And you can treat flying or almost anything in your whole life the same way. It's just a matter of how important is that risk to you.
I agree. I like that. And it comes down to the same thing with you going to space, is how important was the research, the science, the visuals, everything about it to get up there. And the way you worked your ass off, dude, you could tell it was very important to you. And I loved your journey and just everything we've talked about tonight. Like I said, we could go on for another hour, man, because the things you've done and accomplished. So, but we're going to go ahead and do the hot seat. So I got 10 questions. First thing that pops in your mind, just go ahead and spit out. We're going to put a little background music on, 60 seconds. Go ahead and do that. All right. The first vinyl record you've ever owned.
Yellow Brick Road, Elton John.
What's your hometown famous for?
The Robertson Screw.
Oh, all right. Who was the best pizza you ever had?
When I came back for my third space flight, it was in Scotland, but it was a great pizza.
Nice. The strangest thing you've ever seen in the middle of the road or space?
A meteorite burning up in the atmosphere in between me and the world.
Oh, man. What was the first car you've ever owned?
1962 Olds Dynamic 88.
What's one thing people buy you think is a waste of money?
Bungee jumps.
All right, this is going to be a fun one. This is from my father. Are aliens real, and did they really build the pyramids?
No and no. However, no. First question, nobody knows the answer, but no, they didn't build the pyramids.
What is the most interesting, or who is the most interesting person you've ever met?
Oh, gosh, the most.
I think you're mine, so.
The Queen. The Queen.
Oh, man, that's amazing. What slogan or jingle gets stuck in your head every time you hear it?
What jingle?
Slogan or jingle that gets stuck in your head every time you hear it.
Oh, pop, pop, fizz, fizz. Oh, what a relief it is.
Love that. All right. And the last one, and Lorelai, you had in the comments too. Dude, there's not much you have not done. Command of the space station. You've worked your ass off to get where you wanted to get. What is on your bucket list? What else do you still want to accomplish in your life? What's the final thing on your to-do list, or dude, what is on your list?
Well, I'm not trying to impress anybody.
Everything you've done, it sounds like.
Every single day I have a big list of stuff I want to get done, and most of it isn't earth-shattering, or it isn't important to anybody else. And right out here beside me is a dock that my neighbor Bob just passed away last week, but he and I built that dock together, and it took a month. And I am as proud of building that dock together, because we did it just the two of us, as I am of building the space station or writing a best-selling book. It doesn't have to value to anybody else, but do stuff where you learn and you're challenged and you're cooperating with somebody else. And when you're finished, you can look back and say, man, we did that. And every song I play is like that. And so I don't have a bucket list. I just try and do everything I can, to my own satisfaction every single day. Makes it fun to get up in the morning.
Hell yeah, man. I love that. Yeah, I knew that's what I loved about you. There's a reason why I wanted to have you on the show tonight, dude. I just know, because like I said, research and everything else, I was like, everything was just, all right, this guy's interesting. I got to have him on sometime and talk with him. So thank you, Chris, so much for spending this last hour with me, because like I said, you're probably the most interesting person I've ever met, and probably one of the best interviews I've ever had, because I loved tonight just being able to talk with you. So thank you.
Thanks to both of you. Great talking to you. And you, sir, are a skilled interviewer, and it made it both fun and interesting. And there's a self-discovery when you're talking to a skilled interviewer, and you start remembering things you haven't thought of in years, and learning stuff about yourself. And you have a real skill. So it was a pleasure for me also.
Thank you, buddy. So if you guys are looking for Chris, you guys can find him all in the show notes. Everywhere he's at, you guys can find him. Follow this guy. Make sure you get the Apollo murders in October. And hey, maybe we'll have you back on down the road again. And we'll talk a little more about this. And then on the next book, we'll have you back or something. This
okay. I'd love to. And it'd be nice if my band ever's in the Chicago area. We should come in and we'll play a song.
Let's do that. We have to do that. So Chris, you have an amazing night, and we'll talk soon, man.
Take care. Thank you. Be well.
Oh, y'all, that was awesome. I'm sorry I gotta be all, oh.
I know, I've totally fangirled. And I didn't even know that I would. He's amazing.
Dude,
He was amazing. What an amazing human. Like
there's so much more. I could be like, I was so nervous.
So, I'm supposed to take notes. My page is completely blank because the whole time I was like,
yeah, dude, like I was just like memorized, just like couldn't believe it. Like,
what an amazing person. And he's, oh my gosh.
I love that he's
so humble, he's nice,
yeah, genuine
kind,
too.
So intelligent.
And that's why I was asking those different questions, like about the anxiety and stuff like that. I want to see, like, want to hear. He's very like, if you all honestly, if you have time tonight, I think it's only like 15, 20 minutes. Go on YouTube, look up his TED Talk, Chris Hadfield TED Talk. It goes blind space.
It was so great.
Yeah, you guys would love it. Fangirl. I'm like telling you,
I'm like a big fan. Like I'm a total fan right now. I can't wait till his book comes out either. I want to
amazing stuff, and we'll have to have him back on. Lorelai, thanks for the questions tonight. Amazing questions in the chat. We loved having you a part of it. Caroline living right down the street, pretty much from where he grew up in his airport. I don't know if you guys saw, I shared a picture earlier there. There's a Chris Hadfield airport in Sarnia. So crazy stuff.
I know. I literally was like this the whole time.
Doc Eagle's East Space Station is home.
He's proud of what he does, and he takes pride in what he does, and I think that's amazing.
So if you guys are part of the Patreon,
so cool. Definitely,
you guys will have this book
is amazing too. The pictures are phenomenal. I used your word. Phenomenal.
I'm gonna get that tattooed on my back. All right.
Thanks for watching, guys, and listening. It was fun. A lot of fun.
Blast. Oh, I love this. Man, I don't want to get off the air because I love this show so much tonight. So it was a good time though. But thank you guys for joining us tonight on episode 97 with Commander Chris Hadfield. This might have just been one of the best episodes I've ever had. I wrote that down, before the episode ever happened, because I knew it was going to happen. So, but the drive and passion Chris had as a young kid and still has today is motivating and inspiring. The feats he has accomplished and the lives he has impacted is beyond the universe itself. I'm lucky I've gotten a little piece of his time tonight, and just a little piece of his time from someone so inspiring as Commander Chris Hadfield. So thank you again for spending an hour with me, buddy. It was just amazing, and can't wait till next week. We're finally going to have Matt Kenyon coming on. So I'll see you guys next week.
The Gainin Fast on Memphis podcast with Aaron Shriver is brought to you by Arlo Revolution. As we close the book on another chapter, remember, music gives a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and life to everything. Next week, Aaron connects more melodies and memories with other fans and the artists they love. Thanks for being a part of this musical journey, and we'll see you next time on the Gainin Fast on Memphis podcast with Aaron Shriver.